techniques to improve your descriptive writing. So descriptive writing is when you use a variety of, when you're writing to describe, right? And you use a variety of adjectives and colorful language to bring your writing to life. When you're writing to describe, remember that the reader won't have the same picture in their head as you have in yours. To help them to visualize the scene, you need to draw it with your words. I was standing in an empty room. So that's the sentence I've written. Okay, so if I write that sentence, the room can either look like this. It's pleasant, it's sunny, it's neat, it's modern. Or if I was thinking about an empty room, it could also be this, right? Dark, gloomy, creepy. So it's not enough that I only say that I was standing in an empty room. What kind of room was it, right? When we use creative language to bring alive our writing, it's more interesting and exciting to both read and write. Okay, so there are a few tips that I'm going to help you guys in order to write creatively. The first thing you need to know is that we need to use the senses, right? So what are the senses? The sense of sight, the sense of hearing, sense of smell, taste, and touch. Okay, so you don't need to use all the senses, right, in your writing. It's sufficient if you use one or two, or maybe I think two can be the minimum that you use. And the second most important thing when writing descriptively is literary devices. So literary devices are your figures of speech. Okay, so alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds. So she said, she sells seashells on the seashore. Or onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the repetition or the imitation rather of real life sounds. Boom, bang, crash. Metaphor, we know it's a comparison between two things without using the use of as alike. Simile. Personification, we know that a personification is when we give human qualities to non-human things. The couch was sitting idly, right, with nothing to do. Okay, so let's look at the first type of sense that we have. We have the sense of sight. The sense of sight tells us how things looked. I've written two sentences here. Let's see how I go into that. The wall crumbled away to reveal the small tunnel winding into the distance. So here we know that instead of saying the wall broke down, I'm using a more interesting verb. I'm using the verb crumbled. To reveal, instead of saying the word show, I'm using an alternative word, which is called reveal. A small tunnel winding into the distance. The second sentence, the puppy was black with 3 snow white paws and 1 fluffy white ear. It had a long tail with a white tip. Right, the next sense is the sense of sound, right? How things sounded, and this can be very useful in your writing. As I walked into the room, the floorboards creaked. I knocked into the table, and the glass vase hit the floor. Crash. So first things first, we're talking about the floorboards creaking, right? And that can be onomatopoeia, right? What sound do the floorboards make? It can even be personification because we're giving the floorboards a human quality of creaking. Okay, and then lastly, crash. Crash is onomatopoeia. It's telling us what kind of sound the glass vase made when it hit the floor. So guys, when you are writing, I'm going to be giving you an activity, and I am going to give you a head start, such as this kind of a sentence. And you guys are going to have to develop a story on that. Let's look at how you would develop a story from this sentence that I've just read to you. So this is a developed description. As I crept into my grandfather's darkened study, the unwelcoming floorboards began to creak. Clumsily, my leg nudged against his antique table, and his precious crystal glass vase started to wobble. A moment later, there was a heart-stopping crash. Splinters, like 1,000 shiny spiders, scuttled in all directions across the smooth floor. My heart seemed to explode in my chest, while the ticking clock quietly tutted its disapproval at me. Tut, tut, tut. Okay, so let's look at this quickly. Is I crept into my grandfather's darkened study. The word crept it's a more interesting way of saying walked, right? So we're using interesting verbs. Grandfather's darkened study. It's not just a room anymore. Now we are describing what type of a room it is. The unwelcoming floorboards begin to creak, right? So we did talk about this earlier. We said that unwelcoming floorboards is personification. We are giving human qualities to non-human things. Clumsily, right? Clumsily is how you're doing something, so it's an adverb, right? So we use interesting adverbs as well, telling me how I done the verb, how I done the action. My leg nudged against the antique table. We're also telling us the adjective antique is telling us what type of table it was. And his precious crystal glass vase started to wobble. Again, precious crystal glass, all of that is creative adjectives. Started to wobble. A moment later, there was a heart-stopping crash. Onomatopoeia. Splinters, like 1,000 shiny spiders scuttled. All of that is alliteration. Remember, alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds. So here it's the repetition of this sound. My heart seemed to explode in my chest. So while the ticking clock quietly tutted its disapproval at me. Okay, so what I was trying to say is that this is a perfect example of personification, right? The clock is disapproving of this person, right? So he knows he's not supposed to be there, and they describe the scene by the clock being angry with him. Okay, tut, tut, tut. That's onomatopoeia. All right, this next sense is a sense of touch, okay, how things felt. So there was a sharp crunch under her foot. It felt like the shell of a snail cracking. Similarly, we are comparing the sound, right, and the feeling of the crunch to breaking a shell of a snail. The rain was hitting me in the face as I ran to the bus. So all of these are just starting point sentences, right? So we still need to develop these into paragraphs, and we can make really exciting ones actually. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few more tips with regards to this. Remember to begin with interesting open sentences. It tells us about what the description is about. So you can't just throw me into the scene. You have to take me through the scenario, right? Through your story. Use exact, vivid words to create a picture in the reader's minds, right? Tell me exactly what you see, how you're feeling, right? And also at the same point, avoid too much of repetition, right? Avoid saying the same things over and over. Tell me exciting descriptions, but give me new, fresh ones. Including important details about what you are describing. Also focus on the less likely aspects of the scene, just as I was saying. Example, you're talking about the seaside. Don't just describe the predictable parts of the scene, like the waves, the sky and the sand, but also describe the smell of the sunscreen or the noise of the distant gulls, right? All right, and then another very important tip is remember when describing something, you are usually using the past tense. So if you are writing in the past tense or you're writing in whatever tense you choose, present tense or future tense, you need to stick to that type of tense. So for example, I'm going to read to you this paragraph here. And in this paragraph, this person is not adhering to one type of tense. They keep on shifting their tense from past to present to future. It was a cold evening during the last of the winter months. Right now we're talking about the past. Tired and lonely, I'm walking home. So can you see how we're just randomly shifting from past to present tense? When at the top of the road, I see two headlights, white diamonds in the darkness, staring at me, still present tense. My blood will be running cold. Oh my word. Now we've introduced future tense, which is even worse, right? Now it was clear to me, and we switched to present tense again. I should have get a taxi right to my door. And then we're moving to past tense. So guys, keep it in one tense. So let's read the sentence in a way where the tense is one tense. Let's stick to past tense. It was a cold evening during the last of the winter months. I was tired and lonely. I walked home when at the top of the road I saw two headlights, white diamonds in the darkness. They stared at me. My blood was running cold. Now it was clear to me. I should have gotten the taxi right to my door. Okay, another tip is remember to connect your sentences. All right, use conjunctions. Another word for conjunctions in writing is transitions, right? When you're transitioning from one thing to the next, you're changing, right? So use conjunctions like later, then, before, since, next, during, meanwhile, firstly, secondly, therefore, whereas, either, right? All of those can really strengthen your writing. Guys, the last thing you need to do is you need to proofread your paragraph. You can have a word for proofread is edit. Ignore. All right, so let's look through the proofreading process. First of all, write caps at the top of your task. Then cross each letter out thoroughly after thoroughly checking through your work, right? So I'm going to explain to you what caps means. C reminds you to check for capital letters, right? After you finish, cross out your C. Next, check for understanding. Does your paragraph make sense? Is what you're saying making sense? Are you keeping the tense the same, right? After checking, cross out the U. Then you need to find P. Punctuation. Are you using commas, full stops, capital letters, question marks, right? And lastly, spelling, S. Check for spelling, guys. And you are writing it on Microsoft Word, so there shouldn't be a reason why you are not having spell check. Okay, and lastly, let's get to the task for this lesson. You need to choose one of the following incidents on which to write a descriptive paragraph of at least 8 to 10 sentences. So I'm not asking you to write an essay, just a paragraph, right? So a paragraph usually consists of 8 to 10 sentences. Describe your feelings, surroundings, and the events that occurred in each situation posed. Try to use strong verbs in descriptive adjectives. So instead of saying, I walked to the shop, how did you walk to the shop? I had a skip in my step, or I joyfully walked or ran to the shop, right? Try to use strong verbs and descriptive adjectives and follow the advice given in the video to complete your task. So there are 3 topics you can choose from. As she walked on, a smell like rotting vegetables filled her nose. As I opened the examination paper, I realized that I had studied for the wrong exam. The rain was hitting me in the face as I ran to the bus. Okay,